All right, Dennis started the feed there, so I'm going to get going underway. So we're not too terribly late tonight. Thanks for coming. Thanks for flexing. Next week's going to be the last week. I had Teen Challenge graduation last week, so all of a sudden I was, I'm double booked. I can't do this. And I had guys that were my guys that graduated, so I hate to miss that graduation moment. So next week we'll do the 7th gifting, which is, we're at the end of this will be the teacher gifting, the last one that we'll do, right? But tonight we're going to do number 6, which is the giver. And I see on the list here, it's Jason and Scott and Dennis and Andrew Hook, who's not here tonight, Gary and Luke Prescott are all listed as the givers. So they're the good people to get to know. All right, any questions or comments from previous weeks before I start? I want to jump right into it. Oh, yeah, go ahead. Thank you, Chad. Yeah, I've got the handouts up here for tonight, if you're interested in those. Sorry about the title on the top. It's kind of black across there. It's hard to read. I still was printing these out, trying to figure out how to lose the backdrops and our backgrounds on there. I don't know. That was kind of a tough gig to figure out. But yeah, Dennis.
The lessons have been great so far.
Thank you.
The whole thing.
All right, well, hopefully we'll finish with a bang here, the last 2 I got here. All right. So, again, we're in Romans chapter 12, and the back end of 6 and 8, and the scripture verse off of there, it says that we have different gifts based on the grace. If it is giving, so this gift of giving, it says to give generously, which is usually not a problem for the givers. Okay, that when they're in their gifting, they're typically very generous in their motives. So this is the other one. Another verse that says 2 Corinthians 9:6. It says, talks about sowing and reaping. It talks about that you're going to reap what you sow, and it gives to the bottom. It says, every man according to as he purposes in his heart, let him give, not grudgingly or out of necessity, for God loves a cheerful giver. Okay? And I like the words in there where it says that we learn not to give grudgingly or out of necessity, but it comes from the heart. So again, as we talk about motives, this is not necessarily the gift of just giving things away, but it's the motive behind it. Why do we give things out? And the motives we can, come up to be grudging, necessity, or it can be cheerfully. I'm willing to express to people that this is a gift that probably is the bottom of mine. And I'm very willing to give my time and my energy and my thought processes and help people with things, but when it comes to finances, I always say, my dad grew up in the Depression. Okay, he was a fairly young child, but he grew up in the Depression, and the Depression, the devil did a number on our country when he hit the Depression, because it shifted a lot of things in people through that time frame. There was a lot of fear that came about because of the Great Depression, and my dad was one of the casualties of that. He would wash the bread bags,
I had a lot of fear of the Great Depression that happened in 2008.
Yeah, that had, but this was, and you think about the one back then was even greater than that. People lost their houses, and it was bad. And my dad, we would wash bread bags. He'd save everything. They would make their own soap out of lye and lard and everything like that, and they were always waiting for the shoe to drop. And so I grew up with that. That was kind of my history. And so moving into my adult life, into my married life, my concept was always, you got to save every penny you can because you never know what's going to happen. That was kind of the Great Depression part. It's just you never know when the market's going to crash again. And so you always have to have something saved up. You always got to have a savings account. You always got to have money, way to make money, things to coming in. So for me, that was, again, my upbringing. So coming into situations of giving was difficult for me to grab a hold of that concept. because I was just making sure that I had what I needed to. And as I got further and further into Christianity and started hanging around people that were ministers that I started looking up to, I started noticing a trend and a pattern, was that those that seemed like they're fairly successful in ministry and those that, touch people's lives seem to be very generous people. And they seem to grab a hold of this concept of reaping and sowing. That if you reap cheaply, you're going to reap that. And so I've begun to learn to be much more generous in my giving. I was like the speakers when you go to a conference and they say they take up an offering and you pull out your wallet and you got a 25 and a 1 in your wallet. Maybe pull the 5 and the 1 out and throw that in there and keep the 20. But you learn to take the wallet out and, empty the wallet out. We were at a conference that Caitlin would remember, and we went to Montana. Andrew, had been there too. But when they went, for this one anyway, they would take up an offering with every service that they had, And so they would all do this fairly lengthy offering. For a while, I started to get kind of almost like, offering time. Well, that's a good time to go take a break, It's like 45 minutes for them to take the offering. But it became this thing of almost like a competition in a sense. It was kind of jokingly. So they'd take these offerings up, and then the next night, the different person would do it. And so one night, Mickey Robinson was up there, and he was supposed to take the offering, and he says, he drags out this 55-gallon garbage can, and he props says, "All right, we're going to fill this thing up tonight." And he pulled out his wallet, and he says, "I emptied my checkbook," and he writes out a check, and he throws it in. "We're going to fill this thing all the way up." I'm like, oh, man. My thing is, he emptied his bank account that night. I said, I'm emptying it right now. And so I started learning, these guys, they do that. We had a conference down there, and I've said this before, Kristen and Landon Huey, they're speakers at the conference, and they both gave $1,000 to the conference. And so it's starting to, get to me that they're successful in these things because they're reaping what they're sowing. They're investing. I'm learning this idea, this concept of investment, of how what you invest in, you will get back. So I'm learning this concept that God loves a cheerful giver. Okay? So I took a moment and I looked this word cheerful up in the Greek, and guess what? It means hilarious. I like that because it's hilaros is the Greek word, actually. That means hilarious, that God loves a hilariously funny giver. I mean, this is kind of the idea, the concept of I'm given because I just, I want to give. I enjoy it. It's cheerful to me. It's just an enjoyable thing for me to give. That's, again, this is the motives we're talking about, remember. So, merry, willing, cheerful. It's not a grudging thing where I go, oh, man, I got to give again tonight. They're taking an offering tonight. It's I get to invest in this. And I want to invest in it, okay? So let's define the giver then. The giver then are the arms of the body, which is an interesting thought process. We've talked about the head and the heart, the mouth, the eyes, the hands. Remember, the servers are the hands. The givers are the arms of the body, and I'm going to tell you why that is. Anybody want to speculate why that is? Yes, they extend themselves out. And we're going to talk about how they do that. The giver represents the arm of the body because they reach out both to give and they also receive. And we're going to talk about that concept of that idea again of the motive in just a second, okay? So, the giver, again, I make this tie into the giftings that, for me, this is just a definition thing I've come to recently of I grasped a hold of, is the idea that the prophet and the exhorter and pretty much the mercy motives, I feel like, they're slightly bit less. They kind of tend to live in this spiritual plane almost all the time. And their struggle is to go from the spiritual plane to the natural plane. You've heard that thing, too spiritually minded to be any earthly good? The other giftings, the leader, the servant, the teacher, and the giver struggle a bit more on the natural side and getting up to the spiritual plane. So what we do is that we sometimes think that their gifting is a less spiritual gifting because they're not as out there spiritually as the other giftings are, the prophet and the exhorter particularly. But it is a spiritual gift, and it's a spiritual motive, and we'll explain that why in a second. They are motivated by the Spirit and driven by their relationship with Jesus to give. It's a spiritual thing. The Holy Spirit leads them and guides them through this process. And it's more than just they see things in the natural, they see it spiritually. They're grateful for the blessings that Jesus has given to them, and they wish to pass those on to other people. See? So they understand in their hearts and in their minds that what they've received and the things that they have come from God himself. God has blessed me with this. I want you to experience the blessing like I've experienced the blessing. And so then it opens up spiritual avenues that may not have been there before by not giving to people or organizations or something to that effect. Does that make sense? Do you understand? So that, I mean, sometimes we kind of have this concept that it's not very spiritual, but it is. I'm pretty sure that the giver is the most spontaneous gift of them all. That they will jump up on a moment's notice and do things. You can call them up, and they're usually ready to go do stuff. And they, you know, they're pretty easy to get along with in these kind of matters. They often are free and impulsive at times and look for adventure and fun in life. Again, I think it's because they get a lot of life because they understand that life has been given to them. And so they want to experience that and have you experience that and go do that, experience it with you. Okay? They give a lot to life and expect to receive a lot back from life. Again, that's the extension. They're giving and they're receiving life back. So that's why I say I think they're very spontaneous. They want to, when they go to some place, they want to experience it. It's more than just going to an event. They want to take it all in and grab a hold of every nuance of that event, the whole idea around them, all the things that are happening around them. I believe that givers make friends very easily, and they're the kindest, if I can use that word, kindest of the personalities. And you think mercy motives are very, I think mercy motives kind of, oops, I lost my slide there. You think that mercy motives tend to get that look because just of who they are and the way that they are empathetic with people. But I think that the givers make friends, again, because they have this ability and desire to give of themselves. So giving to a giver is more than money, although that's really kind of the primary concept of it. And when you think of giving financially, which is true, but they're givers of their time and of themselves. They invest themselves into situations quite well. You understand what I'm saying? They take a lot of pride in the things that they have and the investments that they put themselves into. They enjoy, again, there's that word enjoy because it's a motive. They enjoy sharing themselves with others and spending their life with other people. So they're not isolators. They're not usually not introverts. They may be that. Now remember, I told you this at the beginning, that the test is subjective, right? That you're not going to always, every person's not going to fit the definition exactly to the T of this, but it's also affected by, I think, our life situations. Because sometimes, the spouse that we get, or the parents that brought us up, or friends that have rejected us and hurt us or whatever, they can sour us in certain things. I'm saying kind of at the heartbeat of it, I think without the influences on it, this is pretty typical of what the giver's like. So just to say that. Okay. They look for lifelong friendships and they're willing to commit themselves to friends. My understanding, I got Joy out there, I'm not sure of that, but my understanding is, from my recollection, Andrew is a giver. And you might think that there's other things in there, but I think when he took the test, he came up as a giver. So I've used him as an example often in this realm, that when he makes friends, there's not a lot of them, but they're lifelong friends. He's committed to that relationship. And so the givers that I've seen are typically that way. Do you feel like you're that way, Jason? It's not like you have lots and lots of friends, but the few that you have you're very committed to, right? Scott? Not so? not so. Again, that's what I'm saying. These things can be tempered by our situations. All right, so it says the giver, above all, they want to, again, there's that term, they want to give of themselves. They're ready and willing. Usually you just got to ask. They won't assert themselves into the situations oftentimes, but they want to give of themselves inside. And if you ask them, they will respond, typically. Okay? They're giving, again, as I said, it's in money. That's usually the thing of it, but they will give possessions, time, effort, energy, relationship. They'll give all those things to you because that's the nature of who they are. But usually it's tied into money. I mean, that's how we would define them, and they might define it as well. Givers are able to see the blessings that come from giving, and so they desire, again, as I said this, to share this with others, and then they use that as a motivation to give others to give, so that they can learn to receive the blessings as well. Again, it's not like you need to give money because they need your money. It's, can you understand that if you do give, you're going to receive a blessing back? And so, I've heard multiple teachings and people about this, and that's what's really set into my heart about this idea of learning to reap and sow. And I want to sow or reap in the blessings I can. We had learned this kind of early on. We had a couple that was kind of a mentor couple to us when we were kind of first married. And we spent some time with them, and they gave us a pretty sizable, check one time. And we were like, oh, we can't take this. We can't accept this from you. And they said, well, if you do that, if you reject this from us, you're going to rob us of the blessings that we could get from giving to you. So, we had to learn to receive that from them and learn to understand that concept that not that they were giving solely for the purpose of getting the blessing, but they're saying, I don't want to get robbed in a sense. They weren't looking for money back, but God's going to bless us in some way, some form, some shape. You have a question there, Douglas.
But I think the giver generally has difficulty receiving.
They can receive. Yeah, it can be. Again, like I said, they do receive. They will. That's why the arms extended. They do give, but they do receive. But it's a more difficult process for them. That's why it says it's more blessed. What is it, to give than to receive? How is it? It doesn't say it's easier. All right. I believe that givers are typically people-centered people. Okay. Now, when I talked about the leaders, for example, and even somewhat the servants. You find at times that they're very task-centered in their relationships. Sometimes it can be so much, so what can I get out of you, or that kind of thing, you know what I mean? Like, they're worried about, the numbers of people they have around them to do the things they need to be done. But givers, I think, are people-oriented. When they see things about to give and those kind of things, I'm going to talk about that in a minute, they're centered on the people themselves. They're not dependent upon their relationships, though, which is different than mercies. Again, when I talked about mercies, mercy motives people get very dependent upon relationships. That's what kind of refuels them, and they just really enjoy being around people, and they get themselves recharged this way. Givers don't necessarily recharge being around people, but they like being around people, and they enjoy people, and they're concerned about people, and I think that's why in their heart they want to give, and they want people to have the blessings because they want them to grow, right? Like I said, they get joy from being around people, but yet they can be alone. Again, not like mercy motives get really stressed out being alone. If you hang around Danny for a while, you'll get that picture. Oh, Danny, he just pulled up. He's so funny, man. He cracks me up. I want to call us up. What are you doing? He's been in the house for 2 hours all by himself. But they can be content to be all alone. They can go, an extended period of time being by themselves. But yet they like being around people. So it's kind of this weird juxtaposition of things that it just doesn't faze them one way or another. I guess that's what I should say. They're not stressed out. So there's a difference. So I'm trying to get to this point that of the two giftings, mercy and giving are the most relationally oriented gifts that there are. They're always kind of around people and they like people. Mercies get stressed out being alone. Givers don't get stressed out being alone. But there's both have this love to be around people and enjoy. They enjoy games. They enjoy, being with people and watching the people watching, that kind of stuff. I think along with the servers, they're usually very quick to volunteer to help when need is brought up. So if you're looking for volunteers, look for the servants and the givers. Right? So there's your list, Kathy. You're now being targeted for the kitchen. Look out. But you'll notice that they're usually pretty quick to give into that. They bring together available resources in creative ways. They can find ways to make the resources come together. And I told that story, I think, with the leader's story about Mike McParland. I think Mike's second gifting was giver. But he had that, boy, he knew where all the resources were. He could find them quick. That's what Andrew did this lodge weekend. And he had all these people show up from all places. And he knew how to get the lifts, and he knew how to, it's like a leadership thing. But givers can find the resources, usually at a good cost, a good rate. They just have this concept. Because, again, I think part is because they're good at networking. Because of the people thing, the friendship thing. They kind of Rolodex that, and they know, oh, yeah, I can call on, Heath to come up here and do this, or I can call, Chad to come do this, or Jason to come up and do this. And, you get to know your people around you, and you get to know their skill set. And because you're comfortable in your relationship with them, you're more than willing to call them up and ask them for help. And they'll, because of the relationship and the give and take, usually they're more than willing to respond to that. Givers can be few in numbers, which is pretty typical. Usually when I do this, the bottom two giftings are the servers and the givers, as far as the numbers. I don't know why that is. You think God would have an equal distribution of it, but pretty much every time I do that, there's few givers and few servants compared to the other gifts. But they will pop up in situations, group ministries, committees, because I think they see a need and they're willing to reach in to meet that need. So they're talented individuals who can go to different groupings in different situations. I wonder why this is that way. All right, so let's talk about some of the characteristics then of the giver themselves. A giver's basic motivation is to conserve and share resources in order to meet needs for other people. So they might be willing to compromise in their own personal goals and their own personal ethics, home needs, to see other people's needs met. Okay, they want to see other people succeed. So they will conserve and share their own resources at times, or figure out how to do that at other times for organizations to, again, meet the resources to meet the needs further down the road. Okay, they want to do that. They're motivated to see that others have the resources that they need to do the work. And I say the Lord, but I would say also in business too. They're pretty good at that. They find creative ways to save money. They find creative ways to reuse things so that they can bless other people and have more money for other purposes. Givers are always worried that their gifts are quality driven and they want their gifts to matter. I think there's a top half to that one. There we go. They take delight in finding the needs that others overlook and then like to meet those needs. I think they get a lot of joy out of that. Hey, I found this, seed spreader on the side of the road or something like that. Or, I had Mike Davis that came out there, I found this hedge trimmers for, here you go, you can have it, And he just got so giddy that he found this like $10, thing at Goodwill, but it meant so much to him that he knew I had that need, and he found a need in an inexpensive way, and he met it. He just really got a lot of joy out of that. So if they can meet the need that other people overlook, particularly, they take a lot of pride in that, and they enjoy that quite a bit. And they want to make sure that what they do are quality-driven and that their gifts do matter. It's more than just a quick thing, okay? Givers love to stay out of the limelight and give secretly, particularly more introvert. What is the bottom half of that sentence? There we go. Are very reluctant for others to know they're giving. I've shared this story I'm doing this online, as might be great, but I'll tell on him anyway. Mike McParlin, who used to be at our church, and there was a Sunday or a day one day when I'm at home and the knock on the front door, and I go to the front door and open the door, and it's Mike. And he said, well, I said, I wanted to give to the church, and I want to give this to you because I don't want everybody to know that I gave this. And I opened up, and the check was for $10,000. And then several years after that, at the end of the year, he'd come up and he'd hand me a check for $40,000 at the end of the year. And he was like, I don't want people to know this was me that's giving. I mean, they probably could figure it out, but he was trying to stay out of the limelight. I don't want fanfare. I don't want people to know. I don't want people to come shaking my hand, thanking me and stuff like that. So I think, givers tend to, they just want to give. They just want to bless other people and not worry about any accolades for their giving or for their efforts. A giver saves money by making wise purchases. They intend to avoid impulse spending. Again, every financial move is calculated against the big picture. Investments of how can I save my money so that down the road I can do this, and I can go over here and I can do that with it. And Jason's shaking his head, and Carla's laughing at him. So, are you saying no? That's not you. Is that you, Scott? See all these characteristics are different. That's Scott. So he's saying, and my daughter's pointing at Andrew Hook. Very calculated about the long term. Interest rates are an important concept. What are you paying for interest? Don't have credit cards, that kind of stuff. It's very calculated about these things. They don't impulsively buy a house or something like that. It's like, is this the best investment to make? And it takes a while to get them to move along on these things. A giver gets great joy of finding less costly ways to do things, whether it's time, energy, money. What's the more efficient way? Givers try to be efficient in their time and their ways to do things because they've got a lot going on typically. They're involved in a lot of things. They're involved with a lot of people. And so they're always looking for ways to... What's that? ADHD ruined that one for him. Oh... Any comments on that? You do that, right, Scott? Yeah.
Well, I never really had money to ever be, the money was never my gifting, it's my time.
Yeah.
Or, like, I've given away my shoes that I was wearing before, stuff like that.
Yeah, see, that's what I'm talking about. It's the motive, and it's a spiritually driven motive. It's God speaking to you to do that, to bless somebody else, because you're more concerned about the other person than you. And that's, again, whether it's in this form, whether it's giving away money, whether it's all, the motive is to bless others. Dennis, you're in the back there.
Doing stuff behind the scene that you don't want people to know about.
Yeah, you do that, Dennis. Givers particularly enjoy preventing waste by exercising wisdom and accountability to things. Again, it's just tough with having joy in the back, but Andrew likes to wash out the Ziploc bags. And reuse Ziploc bags. The rest of us will throw them away. He's like, we got to reuse these. It's smart. We keep using them. Find ways. What's the other one? We were looking for, was it curtains? He had tubs full of old curtains. They were looking out for drop cloths or something the other day, and Andrew got this big tub full of old curtains. Why did you keep curtains? Well, you never know. We could have used them now. Oh. I never realized that's probably a lot of what my dad was, I guess. Part of it, but part of it was the Depression. But saving resources brings a giver almost as much pleasure as giving them, because, again, they regard savings as the key to opening up the door for something in the future. So they're big savers, big into savings a lot of times, having money in the bank, gaining interest on these kind of things. I remember I said, the Mercy Moses have trouble hanging on to money. If you got it now, spend it now. And the givers are like, well, wait a minute. We might need that down the road for something down the road. But they like that coming home. You've heard that story about the guy that comes home from work and he goes, honey, I saved us $100 today. And she said, really? He says, yeah. She says, I got an extra $100 in the check, so I put it in the savings account. She says, well, you know what? I saved us $100 today as well. She says, really? She says, well, there was this dresser That's normally $200, and I got it for $100. So I saved us $100. I think that givers, again, tend to accumulate savings. Even in times when it's tough, they have a savings account of some form. They have money put aside for something in certain ways, in certain forms, whether it's cash in a jar under the, in the house, or it's a savings account. They always seem to have a good capacity to be able to have money saved up for things. I would say that this is probably pretty true. They usually don't spend more than they make. They don't really rely upon credit cards, and don't like to run up the credit card debt, but they don't run up the credit card debt. We taught our kids when they were younger. We would teach them Dave Ramsey before Dave Ramsey was cool. If you guys know anything about Dave Ramsey, but we had envelopes, right? Caitlin will remember these. We had envelopes, and when we would pay them things, they would give money, or if they'd make money, we would tell them to put 10% away for tithe, and then a percentage in for savings, and then there was spending money that they could have and stuff like that. And so for most of my existence, I've operated off of a cash system with envelopes. Now lately, I get these electronic deposits. Now it's more difficult. I don't like going to the bank and pulling it out of the bank, so I keep it in the bank. But when I was getting a physical paycheck, I was going and cashing that paycheck and putting it in envelopes. And then we would teach the kids budgeting and so forth like that. One time I borrowed Andrew's car. I borrowed the Mazda that had been mashed in the back end. And I borrowed the Mazda, and I'm just maybe a little snoopy. I don't know. I'm driving and I opened up the center thing between the chairs, and guess what? There's an envelope in there labeled gas. And there was cash in that envelope for gas. See, so they don't. He liked to pay cash for everything. Make sure he paid what he had in front of him instead of using a credit card. I discovered this. I kind of knew this, but kind of didn't know this. But you do realize that every time you run your card, you're getting charged like 2.5% to some degree. Some businesses will absorb that cost. Like I went to the car repair shop, and they're upfront about it, says you're going to pay the fee for this. They run it through, and it's 2.5% on top of my bill. You're losing money every time you're using your debit card. I'm just saying. You use cash, that doesn't come into play. A $50 bill goes all the way through the hands, and it's still a $50 bill. But after a $50 charge goes through a bunch of hands, it becomes less valuable. I learned that recently. Like I said, they try to pay in cash as much as possible because that's the smartest investment that you can do. Save up for it, spend it with cash. My friend Aaron LeBlanc used to do rummage sales and stuff like that. He found that when you go to a pawn shop or almost any place, he says they pull out an item and it's $300, and he says pull out a wad of cash and throw $250 down the counter. Says I'll give you $250 right now. It's just a kind of way to tempt them into, oh, yeah, it's right there. There's cash right here. I'll just take that and go with it. That was a tip I gave to you. How about that? One thing with givers is they have this understanding of authority and accountability. They understand authority, who's in charge, and how to respond to that authority and react to that authority and to live underneath that authority. And they also understand accountability. And so to them, that's a very important concept that they're involved with organizations, either at their work or even a church or any other fraternity or anything that you're involved with. Accountability is a big issue. Are you accountable for the money that you bring in, that you spend, which is an important concept, should be to all of us, but to givers, they hold that up as a high end. They expect that when they give, they want to be held accountable, and they want other people to be held accountable as well, because it's a moral value of truth to them, like with the prophet of black and white. They're pretty black and white about that typically. I want to be held accountable for my giving. I want you to be held accountable for your receiving. Givers evaluate spiritual growth in terms of resource use, accountability, and I guess I got to click it one more time, dependability. So what I'm saying by that is that if I come to you, you're pretty new into faith, You're learning this. And as you grow in your faith, you're starting to learn more about how to be accountable on a job and show up on work on time and be accountable to say what you do, what you're going to say, help in the kitchen and things like that. And you're dependable and you come on time, you help out, those kinds of things. As you grow in that, to them, they think that's a spiritual growth factor. Because again, the Word talks about that. We're talking in Colossians at my class at Teen Challenge right now, and that says, do everything unto the Lord and not unto man, right? So as you learn that, it's a premise that Jesus taught us, how to be in this world that we should be accountable, dependable, and use our resources wise. Again, the story of the talents that he gave to the man, the guy that had the one talent, he buried it in the ground, and he called him a wicked person, and he threw him out because he didn't take the resources, and he didn't have an accountability to him, and he didn't have a dependability to use that resource and grow in that resource. That's how givers see spiritual growth. As I learn to be better at my resource use and my dependability, I'm growing spiritually through that and because of that. Okay? Givers are hard workers. Very hard workers. Again, I think it's a matter of the accountability, the dependability, the part of getting and receiving. They understand that if I work hard, I'm going to receive hard back. And they look at promotions, they look at those kinds of things, and they lean towards conservative, I say, financial and government and family values. I don't know, just why that seems to be a trend on that, right? They tend to be that way because, again, I think it's understanding accountability and authority. Whoops, this is a big deal. I got to stop there. One more. There we go. Givers become personally involved in the lives of to whom they give. Why does that keep doing that? I got to make sure that because this is an important point. That they get personally involved. Again, that's as givers, that's a big deal. When they want to give to something, Bobber comes here and talks about his life and his ministry over in Pakistan, that moves a giver. Because they can empathize, and they can, especially if you're a good speaker and you can kind of really express yourself well in these things, it'll just get a giver to want to be involved with you personally. They would rather give, I think there's probably a pointer somewhere, they would rather give to a person than to a function or an organization. And I think I'm going to talk about that. It's probably in this grouping. So what's the strength of the giver here? Givers love to motivate others to save and give generously. Again, their motive is to learn to save your own money and give generously to the things that you're involved in. And those are things, again, I said, I'm beginning to learn this idea of reaping and sowing and being generous in my reaping and sowing. Givers will pray earnestly about an amount that they should give, who they should give to. I don't know why that keeps doing